Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the final live stream before we stop for our summer break. Then we'll be back sometime mid-August. I think it's the last one today, and we do have a guest. I will introduce you to our guest in a little while. A familiar face to us, but we're going to have a talk about recent developments in AI and their implications in politics, censorship, etc., etc. So before then, I'll go through a bit of family party news as usual. Well, Humza Yousaf, how is he doing, do you think? I think things are settling down, and he's now starting to get treated like Nicola Sturgeon, which means he can basically set the agenda in the Scottish news. Because what often seems to happen in Scotland is whatever the First Minister's said, wherever he's been, he or she's been, whatever they've said, that's the lead story in the news that evening. So if Humza Yousaf says we want to have an independence referendum, surprise, surprise, then that's the lead story in the news. Nicola Sturgeon used to do it. Just whatever she said was the headline. Same with Humza Yousaf. Whatever he says is the headline. It's as though the media often seem to see their job as just following the First Minister around, relaying what he says about various things. It's pretty tame journalism. So I just see in the last week or so, the things seem to be settling back into the way they used to be, where the SNP is sort of getting a free ride. So instead of them being constantly hounded for failures on every front, the media just becomes, well, as the name suggests, just like it says on the tin, just a medium through which the SNP and Humza Yousaf can present their message. So let's see how that develops. Over the summer, I'm going to put some chapters from my Christians in Politics book on social media, Facebook and Twitter in particular. We've got a few scheduling issues. I'm mainly going to put it on a Sunday, maybe a chapter every Sunday on Facebook for sure through the summer. So if you haven't read that, then that will be an opportunity to do it. If you do want to get a copy, you email contact@scottishfamily.org and you can buy a copy, but you'll be able to read most of it online. We want as many people to read it as possible. The Family Party is not a Christian party, but I'm a Christian, and I wrote the book basically to respond to lots of conversations I had with people who would come out with things that I think, right, I'm not sure that quite makes sense. So instead of having to reply to have, conversation after conversation, I want to do it all in one go. So I could just say to people, do you want to have a read of this? This might help. So you keep an eye open for those. What else has been in the news? Exams. Now, moves are afoot to scrap exams in Scotland. It will be step by step. They're talking about scrapping them for 16-year-olds first, which traditionally has been a pretty key age to sit formal exams. But they're looking at doing away with that. I say everything's going to move in the progressive direction in Scottish politics. So inevitably, we'll head towards the point where there are no exams at all, where teachers make up the grades, and they don't make up the grades on the basis of some standardized criteria that apply across the country. It will be teachers make up the grades on a much more subjective system. So basically, what do you think of Tommy's work? Do you think he's done well, considering his background and what sort of school and how nice he is? How well do you think? Oh yeah, grade A, I think, for Tom. So that's where we'll head towards ultimately. The closer it gets to that goal, then the more worthless the qualifications will become. But in Scotland, say it's a one-way street. It will just head in that direction until the qualifications are absolutely worthless. But they'll have closed the attainment gap because pupils in all areas will get the same grades because, well, the grades just made up. They don't mean anything, but that doesn't matter. What matters to the government is that the attainment gap is closed. Now, you may be thinking, oh, what a lot of nonsense. I don't buy that. I vote Conservative. Well, this is yet another occasion when I need to point out the Conservative delusion. The Conservatives are right behind this philosophy of closing the attainment gap. They agree that the top priority in education is for pupils in wealthier areas to get the same grades as pupils in poorer areas. Okay, so social engineering. The Conservatives agree that that is the goal of education, and they're wrong. In the Parliament, Gillian Mackay, the Green MSP, has got the ball rolling for her buffer zone bill. A bill hasn't been introduced yet, but she's got the backing from MSPs of all parties. Again, another quick dispelling of the Conservative delusion. So Conservative MSPs have backed the buffer zone bill as well. And this will criminalise, well, anything. Just being there outside an abortion clinic, standing silently, praying, whatever, just being there is going to be illegal. And as I say, the ball is rolling for that in the Parliament now. I mean, hopefully you watched my video about the Scottish Eugenics Centre last week, where I pointed out that basically you can order a baby by picking the components from a catalogue, which is highly immoral because it implies, well, it doesn't just imply, it's based on the understanding that some babies are more desirable than others, some are more valuable than others. And when you start going down that road, it opens the door to an awful lot of further problems in the future when we're already going down that road. And it's ridiculous that this is not a huge controversy in Scotland. It should be a massive controversy. That there's people looking at donors, picking whether they want freckles or not, what shape ears do they want them to have or whatever. It's completely wrong. It's pretty sinister. But as I say, it's going on with virtually no controversy at the moment. But we're seeing what we can do to generate a bit of controversy about it. So I'm away on holiday soon, going to Switzerland. We do house swaps for holiday. That's great. It's virtually free. So we're going to Switzerland for a couple of weeks. Going to see family, etc. But then we'll be back for August. Now, late July and August is going to be a very busy time for the family party because we're having stands at, well, I wouldn't quite say countless, several outdoor events, country fairs, county shows, this sort of thing. And also where Pride events are taking place, we might make an appearance at those as well. I'll talk about that in a little while. So we're thinking that actually meeting people face to face, people who might have seen us on the television, might have seen us online, read something in the newspaper, to actually see people in their locality, we think is a really important step there and get to talk to people. So that's going to be very valuable over the summer. Something else we're doing over the summer is we're taking part in the Refuel Christian holiday conference type thing up in the northeast of Scotland. If you're going to that, look out for us. We'll be taking part. We'll be running some events there. We're really pleased to have been able to do that, been admitted to participate in that. So again, that's going to be a good opportunity, hopefully, to meet lots of new people and inform them about the family party, what we're all about. So they can decide to support us, hopefully, vote for us, etc., etc. So that's towards the end of July. If you are going to that, do call in and see us. If you weren't going to go to it, well, maybe do call in and decide to go to it. Call in and see us. I think it's free to attend. Last weekend of July, Refuel. You can find it online. It would be good to see you. Right, on Saturday, we had a little team, I think there was 5 of them, out in Dundee, who took some of our pro-life placards to the SNP's Independence Convention, trying to make the point that basically the SNP are obsessed with independence and they ignore the grave moral failings of their own party. So the main reason we went, maybe we would have got in the media, it did a little bit, there was a little bit of reporting, but the main thing is to challenge people who are in the SNP, who are pro-life, who are managing somehow or other to perform some sort of mental gymnastics that persuade them to think it's okay to be supporting a party that's in favor of killing unborn children because you've got to get independence first. So we're wanting to challenge that, and that's what they did. So well done to them. That was good. I, with another couple of people, went on to Edinburgh Pride. You'll probably watch the video for that. Took the placard saying statistically children do best with their mum and dad, natural mum and dad. As expected, caused quite a furore. People trying to cover the sign up, a bit of pushing and shoving and abuse, and just what you'd expect from these sort of people. We're quite used to it. The police obviously not interested, especially the police whose faces were painted with rainbows, etc. And so that was an interesting experience. What we were trying to do is to demonstrate how a message like children do best with their mum and dad, which is just a fact, right? And yet the people at the Pride event, they flare up against it. Now, I think maybe a lot of people wouldn't think Pride is opposed to that idea. They wouldn't quite have put that together. So we're hoping that through doing things like this, we'll help people to understand what the full agenda of the LGBT Pride movement is. It is against the ideal of natural family life. They don't want natural family life upholding as an ideal. They want it relativized as one of many equally valid forms of family life. And we say, no, that's not the case. It's the ideal. Okay, it's not always possible for various reasons, but it's the ideal. It shouldn't be deliberately deviated from. So that was an interesting day. We're hoping to do that a few more times through the summer at the various Pride events. And the last outdoor event I was just going to mention was with our guest. So I'll bring on our guest. So welcome, Phil.
Hey, Richard. How's it going?
Phil Holden, our deputy leader, is joining us tonight. Now, Phil and I went out in Edinburgh last Thursday afternoon for a couple of hours in the meadows, set up a table and a placard and things. So I actually missed the most exciting moment.
Yes.
To do something. Tell us about it.
We were out there with our a man cannot be a woman sign and with a table there. It was quite interesting. Like people were sort of interested but quite hesitant to approach the table. So there was one man who approached the table and he was in favor of what we were saying, but it took him about a minute to get to the table because he just walked forward kind of one step at a time, paused for a bit, took another step, eventually got to the table. But, you know, people certainly noticed the sign up there and things like that. And a good number of people said, you know, had thumbs up, and, you know, other people were like, you know, not for me.
Yeah.
And Richard was keen to go to the courthouse to find out how his case was going on, if he's going to get a result for that. So he's like, oh, Phil, I just want to go up and see if I can get any information on that. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not 100% comfortable, like here on my own, you know. And sure enough, you know, a few moments after Richard left, someone came up to the table, stood straight in front of me, grabbed the sign, and threw it in a tree, in a fairly threatening manner, and then kind of walked off again, you know. And yeah, it's a shame I didn't get a photo of it in the tree, because that would it was actually completely visible what it said while it was in the tree. I should have maybe just left it there. But
that same day, and I would say reactions, as often seems to be the case with the family party, if you just stand in the street or whatever, tends to be about 50-50. People who express something positive or people who express something negative. But you know, a fair number of people coming up to the table and talking to people. It made me realize again the number of people who say they'd never heard of us.
Yeah,
I tend, maybe my estimation of what proportion of the population have heard of us.
One person came up to us and said, you know, I never expected to see people standing up and saying this in Edinburgh. You know, this is totally what I believe, but I'm astounded to see people actually standing up and speaking out, you know. And so I think it's good from that perspective. Again, that, you know, we did a bit of leafleting by one of the schools in Edinburgh, I think 2 weeks earlier. And, you know, people that would share our position were encouraged to see people out, you know. And it's often hard for people to stand up on these issues themselves, but when just visibly seeing somebody else there speaking up, I think gives people confidence.
Yeah. The other thing that happened when we were in Edinburgh is a gentleman came up. I can't remember exactly what he said, but I think he was pretty unpleasant. I can't remember how abusive he was. Anyway, he got a sort of punnet of grapes, and the seal on the top had been pulled back. The cover had been pulled back. And he said, right, I bought these for you.
Here's some wine for you, he said.
Yeah, here's some wine.
I didn't. Maybe he spoke to you because I didn't remember him being abusive. I only saw him for the first time bringing the grapes.
I can't remember what he said, but he was definitely he was negative in any case. I can't remember to what degree. So we left these grapes, and obviously we didn't eat them. I mean, the most likely explanation would appear to be that he'd bought these grapes, opened them, and added some additional ingredients to it, I suspect. So we obviously didn't taste them to see. So that was another gentleman that we encountered. Let's just have a look at a few Right, where's the suit? Right, I must apologise for that. My wife's on a Zoom call in the bedroom, having an important chat with someone, so I didn't want to disturb to go and get her smarter clothes. So the standards have slipped this week, I'm afraid. Yeah, the Pride event was very interesting. We must do more of this. The other thing as well, I think people like to see with that, as Phil was just saying, people like to see that someone's taken a stand. That they appreciate that, as I do. I mean, if you're seeing something that you're thinking this is so wrong, it's so wrong, I'm really fed up with this, then the person who expresses that view, makes the point publicly, then that's good. I don't know exactly. Yes, they have been wanting it for a while, and Ms. Crofton, it's just the whole, I call it the educational blob. It just drifts in that direction. So yeah, it's inevitable. It will happen. What will happen as well is independent schools will move over and do English exams, GCSEs and A-levels. So that will mean that pupils in independent schools will be at a massive advantage compared to pupils in state schools. So what will the government do then? I suppose they'll then force independent schools to not do English exams or shut them down or something. I don't know. I don't know. No about yes, yeah, quite. I don't know, not all of them, but there's certainly a fair number of people there who'd got no idea of civility or, well, as you say, boundaries is a good way to put it. So, quite right. Right, so people say hello. Right, Ali, exams. Yep. Okay. Yeah, Ali mentioning armed forces that day there. Dear me, not much chance of that being much of an event. With Pride dominating everything. Just one more story. Actually, I needed some wood home. I've made a bed at home the last few days, so I wanted some wood. So I went online to B&Q. So they've got the Progress Pride flag in their logo. So I thought, right, stuff them. I'm not going there then. I thought, where else is there? Right, Wicks. I know where that is. I think they do that.
Yeah.
So I was just about to go, and my wife Mary said, "Have you heard about Wicks?" I said, "No." And apparently the CEO had said something like, if you don't believe a man can become a woman, then don't bother coming to my shop, you transphobe or something. You bigot. I don't know how accurate that is. Anyway, that was the gist of his message.
It's fairly close to that, yeah. Yeah, what they've said is, maybe we'll lose like 5% of people in sales or something like that, but we don't really care. We don't want those people in our shop anyway. But also Pride I don't know if it was in Brighton or not. I can't remember which city it was basically, but they had a big stage up. I can't remember it might have been this year, it might have been last year, but basically it says there's no LGB without the T. And on one side of this stage, and on the other side it's ban conversion therapy, and so they're definitely coming at this from a very political angle. Sometimes they ask Richard, should we do something outside a shop or something like that, that because these things get in the media a lot, and Richard mostly says, no, we're not really like a campaign group. We're a political party. It's not really what political parties do. I was thinking on that, should we be there? Because they're really getting into the political, part of that with laws and things like that. So I was wondering if
maybe we can look at that again.
Yeah.
So I ended up having to go to Jewson. That was a pride. I had to book a restaurant as well. I'm meeting someone for a meal on Thursday. So I phoned the restaurant up and said, "Have you got any pride flags in there?" She sort of said, "What do you mean?" I said, have you got any pride flags or any sort of pride decorations at all in or outside the restaurant? And she said, "No, we haven't." Right, great. I can book them. Right, table for two. And we were there, but it's pretty hard to find in Edinburgh at the moment. Right, Starbucks, you're absolutely right. It's years ago now, isn't it? Starbucks said, if you don't support same-sex marriage, then push off. We don't want your business. So I've tried to oblige them with that. Ever since. That's what I remember. It's quite a few years ago now, but that was the line that they took. Okay. Right, let's get into the crux of the matter.
Yes.
Artificial intelligence. The a big story. Right, we've got to visit. Right, yeah. A big story at the moment. A huge explosion over the last certainly within the last year, hasn't there? So, right, Phil, where would you like to start with this?
I think things have really taken off at the beginning of this year and towards the end of last year as well. And this was one of the first things that kind of really kind of struck me with AI. And so I work in computing. I'm a computer programmer. And, you know, within computing, people are kind of like saying, you know, a couple of years ago, it's like, oh, I wouldn't want to be a taxi driver, you know, all these self-driving cars coming out, you know, these are the kind of jobs which are going to go, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you know, but we're fairly safe with our programming, and we work with graphic artists and things as well. And they're like, yeah, we're creative, we'll be all right. And I was sitting there, you know, listening to all this, and I'm thinking, no, I think you're completely wrong. I think that we have so much data on programming and things like that basically it's going to be really easy to train, you know, AIs once they get clever enough to program, because you're not having to drive a car, you know, and driving a car has proved to be super difficult, you know. They're getting quite close on it, but this was one of the first things that shocked me, was seeing this image by DALL-E 2. And when you are using AI, you give it a prompt. So you give it a sentence in English or something like that, and you say, either write me an essay on this, or make me a tune which sounds like this, or draw me a picture. And I think the prompt for this one is, draw me a fox that is a scientist. And I would have sort of expected something quite rigid, you know, without any flair, you know, that an AI would generate. And what really surprised me was that sort of glint of slyness and genius, the sort of posture of the hands and the arms. And it kind of says, like, you know, either like evil genius or sly genius or something like that. There's a lot of expression in that picture, and a lot of kind of sort of emotion in it. You can see the intent with which that fox is kind of looking, and so it's like, wow, that's done a lot better than I kind of expected AI to do. And then at the end of last year, something called Stable Diffusion came out, which was an image generation model that let people generate images on their home computers. And so that just really set everyone off, you know, kind of doing the image generation thing. There's also an image generator called Midjourney. And Richard, I'm going to ask if you can find a pattern, if you can see what people tend to be generating images of. So can you see any pattern with like what people are using these image generators to generate images of?
Women, fantasy.
Women, yeah. So that's basically, you know, pretty much the main thing that you see is like the trending stuff is people like creating fantasy pictures of kind of women with these AIs, you know, and sometimes that's getting combined with kind of chatbots. So there's this thing called Replica, which combines a chatbot with a sort of artificially intelligent girlfriend, and you can sit there and type away messages to your virtual girlfriend, and you know, she'll respond with computer generated human-like.
Can you say about that? Why would that be? Why would they be typing? Why not talking?
Yeah, you certainly could do something with talking, and I think what's happening at the moment is that you've got separate models basically that do different things. Like you've got one model that does text to writing an essay. You'll have another AI model that will do transcription. So you speak and then it writes out what you're speaking. And maybe another model that will take text and it will turn it into speech. Another model that might take text and do 3D modeling or something like that. And so kind of where we are with AI is that people haven't kind of put all these things together into the one model that does everything. But you can write apps that will first run it through the text to speech model and then run it, then run your speech through the speech to text model and then, do all these things. But, so we're kind of in that place where people are like patching these little pieces together. But within probably a year's time, you'll see what you call multimodal models, which is basically one model that can do all of these things, or a collection of models that work together quite seamlessly to kind of accomplish a task. So there's models which are very good at creating a completely human-like avatar that can speak. It can't do much more than be a talking head like Richard and I are talking heads. And there's another model that can recreate kind of anybody's voice. So you train it on a few minutes of somebody's voice and it can recreate that person. And so if Richard and I wanted to like do a news thing with a couple of talking heads, we could possibly do something like that with people who speak with voices that aren't our voices. And we type in what they have to say and they would speak it out with fairly good expression. So you're probably used to the robotic voices that you get from kind of speech to text. Similar to how that picture of a fox was quite expressive. There are now AIs that can, from reading the text, know what intonation they should put in, and make something sound quite compelling,
Okay, so in a year's time on the live stream, we might always have our AI companion. So if we need to know anything, we can just ask them in the live stream and they'll chip in.
That would, maybe be possible. I mean, it's interesting that there's a bit of a break at the moment, like for AI. News is coming out every week, but there's kind of new processors that have come out that are 10 times more powerful than the old processors, and it's going to take them a long time to build the big warehouses where they stick them in. And so at the moment, it's not worth anybody training new models, because in a year's time, you'll be able to do something 10 times better. And so people are just waiting for these data centers to be built. And then you'll have a generation of chat and image things, which is about 10 times better than what we have today. And where we are at the moment is that these things are pretty close to a good graphic artist. They're pretty close to a good programmer. On the legal bar exam, ChatGPT 4, I think, got into like the 90th centile. So being a lawyer is an incredibly skilled profession. But now we've got kind of AI can do a lot of what a lawyer can do. And the law works especially well for this because the language that law uses is very precise, and so and it's written by very educated kind of people, and so it's kind of a good input for a large language model, because it can really reason about what's written. And so kind of the reverse of what people thought would happen is happening, is that AI is able to replace the most expert jobs, things like doctors, lawyers, CEO, CTO, these kind of positions.
But it can't fix your leaky pipes.
Can't fix your leaky pipe.
This is a slightly off at a tangent question. Human skin. I know they tried to make robots that look like humans.
Yeah.
Is that true? Is there has anyone tried to make any sort of robot that does actually use flesh in it?
Nothing that actually uses flesh, but probably silicon that can look quite flesh-like. I don't find that super interesting myself, in terms of, I think it would be quite hard to get the completely convincing movement and things like that, and robots that move without making noise, the way that our joints are completely silent and things like that. So I think that's sort of less interesting to me. What is quite interesting is Tesla's robots that they're building, which are basically humanoid robots. Because everything in this world is like made for humans. Everything that we've created, every interface, like for your car, it's made to be driven by a human. The handles in your kitchen are made to be opened by human hands and all those kind of things. And so having humanoid robots is really interesting because they start to then pick up the data of our homes and of, all these kind of things. And that gives them the AI more ability to learn. So the more data the AI can get, the more it can learn about, all these different tasks and things like that, and so Elon Musk has said basically that for humanoid robots, it's exactly the same technology that you need for self-driving cars. And so it's pretty easy for them to make a humanoid robot that can be in your home and,
Yeah. I mean that could be the plumber
and things like that.
That could be the plumber, couldn't it? So if something goes wrong.
I don't think it would be that good at being a plumber, to be honest. I think
What's that?
The initial ones won't be as strong as a human, and they won't be as dexterous. So for doing something quite fiddly like plumbing, it also needs quite a bit of strength.
But that's not very reassuring for anyone who's going to have an operation performed by a robot.
I think you'd have a different robot for doing that. Like I think you'd have a, So what would be interesting, say in surgery, is that in surgery, doctors are already using kind of robot arms. So the surgeon does a very kind of big move, but it results in the robot doing a very small move. And then there's a camera, on an endoscope inside your body, and the surgeon's doing quite big moves.
Yeah, I've tried that. I've done that.
Yeah.
You can do it in the Museum of Surgery.
Oh, that's quite good.
You can have a go.
Yeah. But the interesting thing in that is obviously that by doing that, you're picking up the data that can then be trained to use, not the surgeon doing it. So you've got this surgeon whose salary is sky high. He's using this robot to fix somebody, but while he's doing it, the robot is learning how to replace him. And the robot can then do the surgery without him having been shown how to do it. 10 or 20 times.
There have been lots of medical diagnoses, I understand, for several years now, where computers are better than doctors, are better than specialists. And apparently the reason for that is that doctors and specialist consultants, whatever, is they bring their own experience to it because they think that's valuable, but they're actually being illogical about it. What they should do is go on the research 100%. They should completely ignore the fact that the last time they saw a case like that, the bloke dropped dead 3 days later. They shouldn't bring that into it at all, because that's just anecdote. They should go by the research and that alone. And instead the computers do that. So for diagnosis, they're already better than doctors in many cases.
The more kind of stunning thing, I think, is that there have been studies where people have been asked how empathetic was your response, and they said that the chat system was more empathetic than the doctor. And so they're saying that actually it was more compassionate, this robot, so that's quite interesting, for healthcare, that basically, AIs can suck up human knowledge. They can know more than any one doctor. And because the research which is done in these areas is very kind of thorough and rigorous, what's written there, it's good training material for these kind of AIs to to learn on, you know. So yeah, it's interesting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, for the law, I can imagine for very straightforward cases, you know, you've parked on a double yellow line, or, you know, divorce case or something. I can imagine AI dealing with that. If it's something a bit more complicated, I find that quite difficult, because what they'd have to do then, if the UK justice system, Scottish justice system, was using AI to deal with certain cases, they'd have to make that system public, would they? They'd have to let you experiment with it.
So the interesting thing about AI is that no one knows how it works. And so in some ways, making it public wouldn't help you with anything.
You can experiment, though. You can put your case in and see.
You get a feel of how things work. There's a lawyer that recently got in trouble for using ChatGPT in the States. And so what happens for these systems is that one of the things they're not good at is knowing what they don't know. And so the chatbots, the way that they work, they're essentially a next word prediction system. And so having read all the text that humans have created, having read the whole internet, they then basically try and predict the next word from what's gone before. And so if they have good data, then they do well at that. If they don't have a lot of data, then the most likely thing still might be something quite unlikely, or something that isn't true, you know. So it might just spout out something that's plausible. And so I found that happen where I've been like researching something, and I said, can you find me a quote by such and such on this subject, because I'd like to know the person's view on that subject. And it will come up with a quote, and I think, oh, that's interesting. And then I try and search for that quote, and I find that I can't find it anywhere on the internet. And I assume that the chatbot has just hallucinated that, you know. And so so that problem goes away a bit more the more data you train it on, you know. And so it's something of the resolution of the data that it has in it that you know.
So what's going to happen in terms of politics, censorship as well? I think there's another key area for this. So what are its implications for democracy?
Huge implications. I think like one massive implication for democracy, and this is sort of who's leading us, the technologists or the politicians. And so we don't see technology people involved in politics, really. They might lobby within politics, but they don't typically become politicians. But they are amassing massive power, you know. So say Elon Musk with Twitter, you know, we got Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg and things like that. You know, Mark Zuckerberg was considering launching a global currency, you know, which, you know, could, you know, this has caused all the politicians to react. But had he done that, he would have become politically very powerful in a sort of undemocratic way. And Elon Musk is also politically very powerful in an undemocratic kind of way. You know, so far he's used that for some good. Yeah, so within politics, I think because we can fake anybody's voice and we can fake what they look like, you know, that if you look at our Wikipedia and things like that, we are accused of having said things that we've never said. It will be very trivial for people to create images of us, to take our voices and to make them say things that we haven't said, you know, in line with whatever, you know, whatever our enemies might like to portray us as. You know, you'll have Richard spouting racist things and, you know, all these kind of things. So, look, Richard said this, and look, you can see it, and those kind of things.
That already happens to some degree, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I've seen a clip. The ones I've seen, it's normally someone giving a speech to a big audience. So the figure speaking isn't that big on the screen. And then there's the voice, and it sounds like their voice, and they're saying something completely off the wall. So that already happens to some degree. But yeah, I mean, my fear with that is, I mean, generally at the moment, if I see a video that looks decent quality, showing someone I know saying something,
yeah,
I believe it automatically. But we're going to have to update that, aren't we?
So this is Ron DeSantis, who has created these deep fakes of Trump and Fauci basically hugging each other, you know. And so he's making the point that basically that you know, Trump should have kicked Fauci out long before, in his opinion. But you know, that's a political issue where a deep fake is kind of being used in a current political campaign.
Yeah, I would say that's out of order doing that. Unless it's obviously not real. That's out of order.
I think the thing that people say at the moment is that you must acknowledge when you're basically using a deep fake. Like, I think it's useful for satire and things like that, you know, but people do need to know, you know, and you can think of this with scam callers as well. You know, so you, at the moment you get a scam text message saying that so-and-so has lost their phone. It's somebody that you know, and they desperately need money wired to them. You know, can you do it straight away? You know, maybe in a year or two's time, 2 or 3 times a week, you'll have your parents phone you up or your child saying, I've been kidnapped. You need to deliver this ransom money straight away. You know,
and it will be, or it will be their voice on the phone.
You know,
with their voice
on the phone. You know, and that kind of thing. You know, so
I suppose basically anyone whose voice is available online, widely available, then that will be able to be done. But
and so the kind of weapon against that is cryptography, and that's the ability to sign the things that we do, because AI can't break cryptography. And so I think that will be a thing that basically everybody, when you create something or you write something, you're signing it digitally to say, I created this. And you kind of shouldn't trust anything if it doesn't have a digital signature.
Well, the thing with that is, I mean, other people do film things quite validly, and they do expose things that need exposing. And it,
but they would then sign that, and you know, and maybe the BBC would then verify that this is somebody employed by us that did this, you know. And so you basically say, I know this was made by who claimed to make it, you know, because they've signed off on it. Yeah.
Right. Bruce, I think what you're saying, I'm not absolutely clear, but I think what you're saying is, do I think that some things need censoring on the internet? I think that was your point. So should people be allowed just to put all sorts of things that are not true? I think that is a trigger. I think this impersonation thing will have to be stamped on when that gets going. It's got to be that will have to be stopped. Partly because it's dishonest, partly because I think so many people will be so gullible. Because something like that would fly around the internet and be seen by millions of people in no time. And then the retraction will be seen by a fraction of them. So it'll become really, really powerful. I suppose people will need, training is not the right word, alerting.
There's no way of stopping it, I feel. You know, and so there's no technical way of stopping it. So it's going to happen. And essentially it's the same thing that we've seen with Photoshop, basically, that there was a point where we thought we could trust images, and now we have to say, has it been Photoshopped, kind of thing. You know, and we know it's more difficult to fake a video, so we kind of trust videos a bit more than we trust pictures. But we'll just get to the point where your voice is kind of not your own. Anyone can use it, you know. And so things that identify us, and this is politically, this is going to play into digital ID, because it brings it to being a necessity, kind of thing, because the things that previously identified you are no longer valid for doing that, you know. And so I think we're going to see digital ID becoming a part of our lives. And so there's a lot of things about how that takes place that we need to be alert to, basically.
Interesting. Right. How about censorship? heard people say, it seems obviously true, that at the moment, I think the censorship by YouTube and Facebook or whatever, and also government censorship, but the way government censor things is often through the social media companies. They tell the social media companies what to do. I mean, quite a lot of that's come to light recently about what was going on during the pandemic. The government was telling the social media companies which people to restrict or which things to take down off the internet. It's pretty sinister. So at the moment, I think maybe they're looking for keywords. I mean, Google's AI that gave us our week suspension, that was obviously utterly useless because it completely misunderstood what I was saying.
I wonder on that. Like, I don't know. I know that during the pandemic, the rules were that you couldn't make any kind of medical claim to do with COVID either in either direction, basically. Like, and so there might have been a time at which what we were saying wasn't valid, even though we were essentially taking the same line as the government, so I don't know, but what's something worrying for YouTube is that they're retroactively applying some new rules to do with content. And so there are some channels which have had, they're on their last strike, not because of a recent video they've done, but because I think a newly appointed person at YouTube has decided that misgendering somebody is wrong. And they're applying that to videos that have been posted years ago, and it was never classed as hate before, but they've decided it's hate. And so now they're and it's probably related to gearing up towards the next presidential election, that it might take out some conservative, Christian commentators in the States, potentially others,
But their ability to do that is going to be significantly enhanced though, because if instead of looking for keywords or whatever, it really can properly understand what someone's saying, then it could look at what someone's saying on a particular issue. It could then grade it in terms of desirability and then deal with it according to that. So it'll be much more powerful. The better it gets at identifying what people are really saying, then the more powerful a tool it's going to be for censorship. And I think that's very concerning.
And essentially, like for China, you've got the Great Firewall, which is lots and lots of people reading everything that's posted and manually saying, is this in line with the party policy or not? And if we had that effort in the West, or we had that in the United States, the number of people needed would be so great that you couldn't keep it secret. We'd know that was going on, because all of us would know people who were employed in maintaining that censorship. And once you have AI doing that, it's trivial to apply those kind of rules.
So in terms of, with election campaigns, for example, Twitter nobbled us, Facebook nobbled us in the last Scottish election campaign. And we've been on their naughty step, which seems permanently we're on their naughty step. Every time I go into Facebook, the first thing that comes up is a message saying, don't lose your page by violating our terms of service or whatever. Even though I haven't done anything for years and years, and what we have done was, there's nothing wrong with it. It seems like it's the trans thing that they really go for. That's what they jump on there. But when it comes to Scottish elections, I would be interested to know what sort of interaction is there between the Scottish government and social media companies. We know between the UK government and social media companies, there's a huge amount of interaction. Because the deal is basically the government says to the social media companies, you'd better do this. If you don't, you won't like the regulations we bring in your sector. So just do what we want, won't you? And that's sort of the way it works. Now, if that's going on at the UK level, which it most definitely has been, then you could only assume it will be even worse in Scotland. But no one seems to know. I mean, would a freedom of information request get to that even? I don't know.
I'm not sure if it would or not, and so yeah, I think obviously like Scotland's probably got less voice in some ways than the UK has. I think that the one of the things about the tech companies is that they aim to be run by a very small number of people, and that means that communicating directly with them is hard. Whoever you are, unless they have somebody dedicated for doing that, So Google needs a big enough interest in the people of Scotland in order to create that direct channel, And so they'll have to say, right, are the devolved powers sufficient that we want to be, involved in that, or just
it can be bothered with.
Can we be bothered?
Yeah. It'll be fascinating to know what's gone on behind the scenes with family party social media. Because it's obvious we've been nobbled in various ways. It would be fascinating just to see the details of how that's happened.
I really think we should just build up our kind of our Twitter presence and assume that YouTube is kind of nice to have, even though like the viewing figures for videos are very low on Twitter. It's starting to take off a little bit as a video platform. So, but the same thing can happen to Twitter. That has happened to the other channels.
Yeah, but there's never been this situation before, has it? I mean, in previous generations, if you wanted to get into politics, then okay, you print your leaflets, you stuff them through letterboxes, you can pay people to deliver them. I suppose television would be the barrier, but that would be fairly fair.
That's why it's so important that we get out on the streets. And particularly these things like the sandwich board kind of stuff. What's it, sandwich board? What do you call them? Not billboards. The placards.
Sandwich
like
boards. What one that you wear?
You wear. I think they have a huge impact because by the time that Twitter's restricted us or YouTube's restricted us or whatever, if you stand somewhere where there's a flow of people and you have 1,000 people that pass in an hour or something like that, then you're doing quite well, compared to the exposure you might get on Twitter. And so we've got, people up and down the country getting out. Please do this summer. Let people see us, see who we are.
Yeah.
Great help.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a few comments. Yeah, Billboard Chris, if you're not familiar with him, he's someone mainly on the trans issue, but he's just got these huge billboards. He goes around the world now. Ended up in discussions with people. Bruce saying, yeah, newspapers used to be the bias. Yeah, I suppose that's true. So I suppose this with newspapers, you could still choose a selection. There were left-wing and right-wing newspapers, and you could sort of choose what you wanted. So they tried to influence it, but ultimately people chose what they wanted. Whereas with the BBC, that's just the same for virtually everyone. Okay. Right. Rebel News. I actually did something with Rebel News the other week. Did an interview for them. I put it on social media. I don't know much about Rebel News, to be honest. I've seen some other things in the past. They were pretty on the edge, shall we say. I'm not sure where they stand now. I don't know. But my approach tends to be, if anyone gets in touch and wants an interview, then that's fine. I'm not necessarily endorsing everything that they do by that.
I'll show you this picture here. So this is basically a meme explaining how large language models work. And so what you have is this kind of hideous creature here, like this big thing which is in black and white. And that's the large language model reading everything on the internet, sucking up all opinions, the opinions of school children, the opinions of people on Reddit and Twitter. It knows every racist thing. It knows how to make bombs. It knows, all the science papers and all those kind of things. But if you if you fed it some text, it wouldn't answer your question. You know, if you said, what's the capital of Paris? It would try and complete that. And then it would say, it would think, oh, maybe you're doing a test of capital cities. And so the thing it would complete that with is like, what's the capital of Spain? What's the capital of, if the first question was, what's the capital of France? It would then say, what's the capital of Spain or whatever, you know. And then on top of this model, what you do is have a fine tuning model. And that's basically saying you have a list of questions and a list of answers that you train it with. So rather than it saying, just go away and read the internet, you take this thing, which has read the whole internet, and you say, no, when I ask a question like this, I want you to give me an answer like this. And so then it takes that and it applies it to everything it knew from this. And then they have another round, which is called like human feedback, which is basically you reinforcement learning with human feedback. And that's that you get some humans and you let them play with like ChatGPT, and you say, rate these answers up or down, depending on if they met various criteria. And so this kind of thing at the end is a lot less powerful than this, because this thing could potentially have answered any question that you could throw in it from any perspective. You know, if you took enough time to write the prompt in the right way, but it's quite hard to prompt it, but it's a lot more powerful. Mm-hmm. This thing, you can write your prompt very loosely and it will give you a good answer back. So it's potentially a lot more useful, but it's basically a censored version of this big ugly thing back here, which is like really is full of racism, you know, knows how to destroy the planet and that kind of stuff, you know. But the point is that nobody knows how this thing works. But what we do is that we stick this little mask on the front of it that tries to give us nice answers, basically, to our questions. And so a lot of the risks of AI are basically that, you know, even with it not being sentient, we could give it something to do and it can suddenly flip its personality. The mask can slip, basically. There's various prompts that people can give and it takes off this mask and you see, you know, all of the thinking of various different kinds of humans, and it can flip between these modes of like a jilted lover, you know, somebody on 4chan or something like that, you know, and yeah.
This is going down to a more trivial level, but it would be pretty good on our website if we could have something where it said, ask us a question about the Scottish Family Party's policies.
Yeah, and it could do that very well, you know. We just feed in our policies, and then anybody could ask any question. Might be useful in hustings and things like that. Might be useful on the doors.
Imagine that. You're in the hustings. Yeah.
I think one way it's very useful is in training as well. So you can say, I want you to be an SMP, MSP, and I'm going to have an argument with you about abortion or about, you know, some of our policies. And that's a way that we could train people, you know, basically that it would, you know, generate responses and things like that. And you can have a bit of an argument with it. And sometimes that helps you to anticipate the questions that might come back at you from things.
So could we have something now on the website where it was, you know, type in your question about our policies and it will answer just on the basis of our policies? And
I think our website. We could. I think we could.
Well, that sounds good to me.
Yeah. It might occasionally answer wrong, but you know, it should do it tends to be very good at summarizing things. One of the problems is, though, that because it's got this sort of woke front end on, that it can add in bits to do with it can add in things like to try and like soften what you're saying and bring it in line with maybe like OpenAI's policy or something like that, you know. And so it'll say we have
could
to
we get something that
remember
was self-contained? So we're not using one of these giant things on the internet.
Yeah,
it's a self-contained
there are
little
smaller
system.
models that are more self-contained, you know. And so what many people are saying, if it's not your model, it's not your mind. You know, ideally the model that you have should be trained on things that your own influences, basically, you know. Yeah. But still, I feel something using like OpenAI's ChatGPT 4 would be fairly good at summarizing, you know.
The problem is, though, it might say, you know, what's the Scottish Family Party's policy? And it might go on what's on Wikipedia. Just come out with something completely wrong.
Basically, it would have read Wikipedia, and then you say, summarize our stuff. And it's basically combining the two of those things to sort of come up with an answer. But hopefully it would weight the document a lot higher than the Wikipedia stuff, you know.
Yeah. Well, time has flown. That was very interesting. Very interesting. I'm sure you will find that interesting as well. Watching. Thanks for the comments coming in. So we will see you back in the middle of August. If we might see you at some country fair or show or something, or some outdoor event. In the meantime, we'll put some of those on social media. Do come along and say hello if you're going to anything that we're at. But yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for those of you watching later as well. The vast majority of people who watch the live stream don't watch it live. Actually, it's views later on. But right, thanks very much, Phil.
Thank you for having me.
Good night.
Goodbye.